The Iron Pens. Chapter 3. The Last Ember. Winter arrived without ceremony. No proclamation, no warning. One morning the rain had become snow. By nightfall the internment camp lay buried beneath a blanket of white that disguised its cruelty without lessening it. The fences glittered with frost. Icicles hung from the watchtowers like rows of knives. The mud that had swallowed prisoners for months hardened into rutted stone, merciless beneath bare feet. For the humans, winter meant thicker cloaks and hotter fires. For the orcs, it meant deciding each morning whether they still possessed the strength to stand. The dead were no longer counted. At dawn, a wagon rolled slowly between the barracks. 2 prisoners walked behind it, lifting bodies from the floors where they had frozen during the night. No names were spoken. A guard simply scratched a number onto a piece of parchment. One body, then another, then another. By week's end, Barrack 9 had lost 12 prisoners. Durok knew each of them. One had fought beside the Blackrock clan during the First War. Another had been a hunter from the Bleeding Hollow. One had been little older than Karguk. The empty spaces they left behind were quickly filled by new arrivals from other camps. The internment camps never became less crowded, only quieter. Karguk's cough had worsened. It began as a dry rasp. Soon it came in violent fits that doubled him over until he struggled to breathe. Every cough left flecks of blood on the floorboards. Durok hid them beneath straw before the guards noticed. Sick prisoners rarely recovered. They simply disappeared. "You need to eat." Karguk shook his head. "I'm not hungry." "You are starving." "I said I'm not hungry." "You are lying." "So are you." Durok looked down at his untouched bread. Neither brother smiled. There was no humor left in the game they had once played. They had both become too thin for deception. The camp physician visited the barracks once every 10 days. He wore clean robes, leather gloves, a scarf that covered his mouth against the smell. He walked between the prisoners with the detached expression of a man inspecting livestock. When he reached Karguk, he grabbed the young orc's jaw and forced his mouth open. He pressed fingers against Karguk's ribs, counted silently, then stood. "This one won't last." He spoke to Sergeant Halbrecht as though Karguk could not hear. "No point wasting medicine." Halbrecht shrugged. "There'll be another in the next shipment." The physician nodded. "Exactly." They walked away. Durok stared after them with a hatred so profound it frightened even him. Not because they expected his brother to die, because they expected him to be replaceable. That evening, the brothers were assigned to unload grain from merchant wagons arriving under heavy guard. The sacks towered over them, each weighed nearly as much as Karguk himself. Durok carried 2 at a time. Karguk struggled with one. The guards noticed. "Move faster." One shoved him from behind. Karguk stumbled beneath the weight. The sack burst against the frozen ground. Golden grain spilled into the snow. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Hundreds of prisoners stared at the scattered kernels. Food, real food, not watery broth, not stale crusts, enough to fill empty stomachs. The silence became unbearable. Then an old orc dropped to his knees. He began scooping grain into his mouth. Others followed. Another. Within seconds, dozens of starving prisoners clawed through the snow like desperate animals. The guards reacted instantly. "Back!" Whips cracked. Clubs swung. Dogs lunged against their chains. The grain became stained red. Durok grabbed Karguk by the shoulders. "Don't." "But, look at me." Karguk froze. I know you're hungry. So am I. But if you kneel, they'll kill you." The younger orc's entire body trembled. His eyes never left the grain. Slowly, painfully, he stepped back. The old orc who had taken the first handful never rose again. That night, hunger became something else. It ceased to be pain. It became madness. Prisoners argued over crumbs. One fought another for a potato peel found beneath a bunk. Someone tried stealing boots from a sleeping orc. Another gnawed on frozen leather. The camps were winning, not merely by starving bodies, by starving souls. Near midnight, Durok awoke. Someone was searching beneath their blanket. He seized the wrist instantly. The prisoner gasped. It was a boy, no older than 15, barely more than a child. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes enormous. "I'm sorry," the boy whispered in Orcish. I smelled bread." Durok slowly released him. The boy looked ready to bolt. Instead, Durok reached beneath his blanket. He withdrew half the crust he had hidden for Karguk. He stared at it for several long seconds, then handed it over. The boy looked confused. "You'll die. So might you." The child accepted the bread with shaking hands. He devoured it in 3 bites. Before leaving, he bowed deeply. "My name is Nerok." Durok nodded. "Durok." The boy glanced toward the sleeping Karguk. "He's lucky." "No. He has you." Durok watched him disappear into the darkness. He realized something then. Hope had become so rare that kindness itself looked like strength. Morning came with screaming. Not from prisoners, from outside the walls. Human voices, shouting, orders. The camp bell rang over and over again. Guards sprinted toward the western gate. Horses neighed, steel clashed, smoke rose beyond the palisade. Every prisoner crowded against the tiny cracks in the barrack walls. "What is it?" Karguk whispered. "I don't know." The shouting grew louder. A horn echoed somewhere beyond the hills. Then another answered it. Not the deep blast of orcish war horns. Something else. Human. Urgent. Afraid. Hours passed before Sergeant Halbrecht entered the barracks. His face was pale. "The Alterac passes are crawling with bandits," one guard muttered. "Refugees, too. They hit another supply convoy. No grain this week." Halbrecht cursed. "Half rations." Groans spread through the barracks. Half of almost nothing. That night Karguk's fever came. His skin burned despite the freezing air. He muttered names Durok had not heard in years. Mother, father, their wolf. The river near their home. Durok soaked a rag in icy water and laid it across his brother's forehead. It did little. "I don't want to forget," Karguk whispered. "You won't." "I already am." "No, I can't remember father's voice." Durok swallowed hard. Neither could he. He remembered the words, the lessons, the laughter, but the sound had faded. The realization struck him like a spear. The humans had not stolen only their freedom. Time itself was becoming their enemy. Every passing season erased another piece of the life they had lost. Durok leaned close until his forehead rested against Karguk's. "Then listen to mine." Karguk opened weary eyes. "You hear me?" "Yes. As long as I breathe, you will never be alone. As long as I remember, you will remember. And if one day I forget," his voice cracked, "then you will remember for both of us." Karguk reached up with trembling fingers. He clasped his brother's forearm. The same warrior's grip, the grip of family, of blood, of a people that refused to disappear. Outside, snow continued to fall over the internment camp, covering the graves of warriors whose names would never be written in human history. Far beyond those frozen hills, Unknown to every prisoner within the camp's walls, a young orc named Thrall was still growing toward the destiny that would one day shake the foundations of the kingdoms of men. The prisoners knew nothing of him. They knew only another bitter dawn awaited them. And for Durok, one terrible truth had become clear. He could survive the camp. He could survive the beatings. He could survive the hunger. But he was no longer certain he could save his brother.